How exciting.
From across the street.
Okay.
I know, I was like, ah. Amazing. Oh, yeah, out of breath.
Okay, I will, okay, call the meeting to order, and please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we got a pretty full agenda today. So, first up is public hearing to consider local law amending provisions of the village code with respect to the environmental conservation board. Is that me declaring that, or we're having it right now?
No,
And
you're.
it will be, I'm sorry, March 18th at 7 p.m.
A motion and a second.
All right.
Yes, please.
Motion to have that hearing. Second, please. All in favor? Got it. Checks over 25,000. There are a couple of checks over 25,000. One for just under 40 for AAA emergency. These were replacing SCBA cylinders for the fire department. One for almost 93,000 for the purchase of 2 Ford utility hybrid vehicles for the police department, and one for the of almost 50,000 for the Main Street camera project, which is coming from capital fund. Next up is correspondence. Those that relate to the ARB, I'm going to save for I think it's item 7. In the where we're having the public hearing on the ARB. So first up is the Historical Society providing us with a list of historic properties, which will come up again, but it's in somebody else's correspondence as well. And just asking us to keep those on record as we're considering permit applications for demolition, exterior alterations, or land use development. Yes, and I have to scroll through them. This next one I'm going to save. It's from Irvington Landmarks Preservation. Come back to it. A note from Dennis, an email from Dennis Mullen, asking that we rename a street in honor of Jack Degnan. On this particular issue, the board needs some time to think about what is our policy. First off, whether it's this actual street name change or it is a secondary street name change. And so I'm going to defer this, and I know it'll probably come up again with regard to the Walker property. So we will have a couple of conversations about it and try to figure out if there's an approach to this. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of changing the names on the streets, so my preference, if we were going to look at anything, would be secondary names, but obviously everyone on the board is going to give their input, so more to come on that. Okay, then we have from Michael Moshan in support of culling the deer. A note in support of culling the deer. He's been a resident for 7 years and fan of the woods, and believes that the deer are making regeneration of our woods impossible. I'm going to save Randy Huff's for item 7 and Randy Huff's submission. And another from Todd Wilson, also I believe in favor of the culling the deer, and mentions the issue also on the Columbia University property. Okay. Public comment. Anybody have anything that, please come up to the mic, just tell us who you are.
Hi, my name is David Rubin. I live at 55 Circle Drive. I have two things to say. The first is very quick, second a little bit long. The first thing is I want to thank the board. I was here last year several times with a fencing issue that involved my own property and other fencing, and the board did a nice job of stepping in, and they helped resolve the situation. And I think in the process had the opportunity to revisit their own fencing policies and how they administer them. So I think that all worked out well. So thank you for that. Now, my other issue is I've lived in Irvington for 20 years. And when I first moved here, driving in Irvington was an absolute pleasure, and now it's an absolute bear. And there are many points to that. I want to make a couple of them that maybe you guys can listen to. We used to have a wonderful path. You came down from Cyrus Field or you came down from Taxter. It was wonderful driving experience. Now it's terrible. We've added stop signs for no reason. When you go to Penny Bridge, I have no idea what the right of way is. It used to be Sunnyside Taxter. Now I have no idea who has the right of way. Okay, we've lowered the speed limit on North Broadway to balance what's on the other side. But the problem is that when you get south of Harriman, people go 35, 40, 50 miles an hour because there's no enforcement. It's pointless to lower the speed limit unless there's enforcement. Stop sign, no turn on red sign at Harriman is ridiculous. I know you guys didn't do it. It's the stupidest thing ever constructed by anybody. It doesn't do anything. And I'm going to make one more point that flips this around, which is this. As I said, I've lived in Irvington for 20 years. If someone gave me a summons pad, I could sit on the corner of my property and write dozens of tickets every day as people come down Riverview Road and bolt through the stop sign at Riverview and Circle at 15, 20, 30 miles an hour. I've lived here 20 years. That's my corner. I've never seen a cop there enforcing it. And that's where kids who are walking up to the high school, they're coming up from the Meadowbrook section, they're coming up from the Gardner Park section on foot. They walk right past my house. There's no sidewalks and there's no enforcement of the stop sign at all. So we need balance. We need to think about how to do this. Lowering the speed limits is not the answer. Adding stop signs is not the answer. And it ruins it for everyone. That's it.
Thank you. Maybe Larry, you want to mention to the chief a couple of points just to see if he can do something in regard to enforcement.
I would, yeah,
Go ahead.
I mean, I would say one thing. I live on Riverview
You
Road,
live?
as
You
you
know?
know. I do know that, but I would say that actually David Walsh, had been on Circle Drive several times. I think people on Riverview Road had complained, and there was some enforcement. Maybe there hasn't been recently, but there had been. I mean, I hear you because I live on that street, so I know the problem. But yeah.
Anybody else? Public comment?
Hi, Dave Zweifel. I just was a little surprised to see the ECB being scheduled and a whole document about it. So great. The ECB has been a little non-entity for a little while. I would like to request that before the public meeting that we get a little history of what's been going on with the UCB. Presumably there was supposed to be annual reports from them and reappointments, etc. So my question is, when was it last active? When was the last appointments made? And if so, who? Some idea of just why this is on the agenda or how it got there. I assume that it has something to do with the concept that we need to improve the process of getting a building permit into town. So this is a piece of that. And I would hope that we consider this one along with all the other pieces of that. Rather than just draw lines through items. Okay?
Do we want to address that now or wait until?
I mean, I don't have the information he's asking for. so-
Right, yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
asking for the information before we get to the meeting so that we can, various people, interested parties can express themselves about it.
Yeah, talking about why it's on the agenda, right?
Yeah, I mean, and Larry, feel free to correct me if I go astray, but it hasn't been participating in the process. This is partly because of staffing and other reasons, but and I believe we've also got others who are, in some respects, stepping in. I understand it's not in the same capacity, but we have landscape advisor in this process, and you have Green Policy Task Force. Again, they're not a complete substitute, but you do have organizations that are
I
substituting.
think that's
for-
great, and
Yeah.
an integrated plan for it all
Yeah.
would be fantastic, but I would like to sort of understand what that plan is,
Okay.
rather than just look at, are we eliminating it as per
Understood.
this document?
There's also the legal problem, that there are certain things in the code that say you have to get approval of these. We've just been ignoring that. And
Exactly.
Mary Ann pointed out, we shouldn't just be ignoring that. If it doesn't exist, then it shouldn't exist, and
Hello. Indeed. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. The consent agenda, which is adopting the minutes, appointing part-time personnel in the rec department, and approval of certain budget transfers. I'll make a motion to do that.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. Public hearing to consider a local law amending the village code to limit ARB review of solar panels, developments requiring HOA approval, and rear of structures.
So make a motion to open the hearing.
Motion to open the hearing. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Yeah, Mary Ann, do you want to just give us the highlights on this?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is, as you know, there was a much, much more comprehensive set of amendments respecting the ARB that the board was thinking about. And then the ARB sent a memo saying, hold up, but in the meantime, they sent a memo on November 27th, making several suggestions to kind of simplify things process-wise and for the ARB. And so this is in response to the ARB's proposed changes. And so the local law would do a couple of things. Number one, it would not require ARB approval anymore of solar panels. Right now, there's ARB approval of solar panels. This law would eliminate that, except for in buildings in the historic overlay district. Solar panels in the historic overlay district would still have to be reviewed by the ARB. It also would eliminate ARB review of the reconstruction or alteration of any building in a community that requires HOA approval for exterior changes, like Field Point, places like that require HOA approval. Then it doesn't also have to go to the ARB. And also reconstruction or alteration in the rear of any building not located in the historic overlay district, provided that the reconstruction wouldn't be on any portion of the building facing a public street or park. So we'll need ARB approval of a change that nobody's going to see except the homeowner, maybe the next door neighbor.
And those all came suggested from the ARB?
Yes, yeah, there's a memo. Actually, they had several changes to say eliminate ARB review of structures and subdivisions with HOA review of exterior changes. Only building department review for rear structure applications outside of the historic district. And rework the solar panel laws to use the building department review outside of the historic district. So this came from them. Okay. Then what the okay, that's in section 9.6. Section 9.12, that's really just a change to implement what you changed in 1. And then the change in section 3 is, it says, right now it just says solar energy equipment is a permitted use. But it does get reviewed by the ARB to make sure that there are standards for the review. So by eliminating ARB review, you don't want to throw out the standards altogether. So what this says is that the use is permitted, provided that all reasonable options have been considered to achieve compliance with the solar energy guidelines adopted by the Board of Trustees. So it's not, that's not really changing anything. It's just putting the standard someplace in the code, since it's not in the ARB section anymore. So that's it. It's really just two changes.
Okay, and I know there's a bunch of people who are eager to talk. Perhaps the correspondence that I bumped, maybe I should let those folks go first so that they can sort of summarize. I don't know if Randy or
Right, and Rick, do you wanna let Rick? 'Cause
Rick, well, just, okay, go ahead.
Rocco, Rick Rizzullo, Chair of the ARB. I just wanted to say, and I'll let the letters speak for themselves, but I just wanted to say that the letter that we sent in with these changes, that was meant as a conversation starter, not a conversation finisher. I just think we need to have a greater, longer conversation about all these issues, in addition to other issues that we're all looking to make to streamline the process. And at this point, we haven't gotten there yet. But these are some things that we'd like to look at, but there's more than meets the eye with all three of these issues. So as I said, I'll let the letters speak for themselves, but I just wanted to make that clear.
And at least it was my understanding that that was the case, because we didn't take everything that was in that letter and say, let's go do it. We picked the ones that we thought, okay, this is low hanging fruit. We don't have a problem with that. Why don't we just put that in place? It's one less thing for us to talk about later. Unfortunately, I didn't realize there was a lot to talk about on those issues.
Obviously there is. Just look at
As there is
the
with
letters.
every issue,
Yes,
apparently.
of course. Thank you.
All right, who wants up next? Go ahead, Randy.
Randy Huff, ARB member. So you got my letter. The biggest issue I have is this local law will lift some of the protections we have for some of the historic buildings in Irvington outside the historic district. So my letter, I won't go through the whole thing, but I do provide an example of another jurisdiction that solved this issue pretty simply with just adding a couple lines to their code. And applying their guidelines, historic guidelines, to non-listed buildings within their district.
So,
Go ahead.
you go first, you go
I was
first.
just gonna ask, how is it that we, and you'll excuse my ignorance on this particular issue, but how is it that we are able to decide, absent an outside designation, either a national organization or otherwise, what is an historic building other than the fact that it's old? In other words, whose judgment are we substituting for that decision? Just the historical society.
Right. So what happened in Bellingham is they did define a list. They defined what a historic building is, and they defined a list of these buildings that are not covered in their district.
Just wondering, and I don't know if the village attorney can answer this off the top of their head, but you are in effect taking rights away from property owners who, unless they're in full agreement with the fact that, yes, my home's historical, please do this. What rights they have in response to are deciding that on sort of the Historic Society is not a governmental agency, it's a 501c3. So their power to designate these things as historic buildings, while they can make the observation that they're a historic building, and quite frankly, they probably missed some homes. Mine's 130 years old. Does that make it a historic building? I don't know. It may not have any characteristics that make it worthy of that, but how we come to that decision, or how they came to that decision, would be relevant to me if I were a homeowner and suddenly I had additional hurdles that I had to jump through.
Right. So yeah, there's a couple things to unravel in there, and I think one of the differences is historically significant, not just historic. The other thing is the rights that we're taking away or imposing on them is the voluntary guidelines. So the attorney would have to weigh in on that, but they're voluntary. We're not like, we're suggesting how you deal with your construction or renovation, not imposing rules on them.
But they
But-
have ARB review where otherwise. they
Right,
wouldn't.
that's an additional legal requirement that you're imposing on them.
Well, right now, they do have ARB review.
No, but in comparison to the law they proposed.
Right.
So
Well, if we
that's
do
the
it,
difference.
if we do it during this law change, though, we're not removing rights. They already have the
Well,
imposition of
I
ARB.
understand.
a good lawyer
reviews.
can make the flip side argument of that, which is you just give everybody else a benefit in my neighborhood. How come
Right.
I didn't get that benefit? I'm not saying this is determinative. I'm just saying it's something we have to figure out because it wasn't as simple. Not that anybody suggested that was a simple tweak to what was being done, but
Right.
there's more to think about on that issue.
Yeah, I can see there's a lot more behind that. I don't know how they did it so simply, but they did it. So I think it's probably something we need to discuss.
Mary Ann, can you, I'm not asking you to make a pronouncement now, but maybe take a look at that Washington law and just, it was in our correspondence.
Yeah, I saw
just
it.
to-
I saw it.
Okay, just to see if there is some way that we could do that. And yes, I'm a little curious as to how they got away
Yeah,
with it.
I'll look at it. And
Okay.
municipalities can designate, but this board was some years ago, made a decision not to, not to.
Outside of the historic district, not to designate the historic.
Right, there are, and certainly the designated buildings could be added to this, although I don't think it adds anything because, I mean, it could be added. I'm not sure it adds a lot because they're bound by the landmark rules, but that wouldn't be an that would not be a unreasonable, burden for them. They're burdened anyway, but yes, you're right. Some villages have, or municipalities have called buildings historic and made, more different requirements on them. But in what context did this was it about 10 years ago, 8 years
Right,
ago?
right.
Maybe
I
before
was
the
on the
historic
board, so
district.
it was
About 8
within
years
8
ago?
years, right?
Yeah, okay, but it was,
And
it was.
it was as a
in
result of the comprehensive plan, and we were looking for incentives to give homeowners of potentially historic buildings the incentive, but not the requirement to, agree to be,
Right.
Historic buildings. And we were looking at opportunities for either to use their buildings in ways that hadn't been used, prior to that.
There
But the
was,
board felt strongly that we could not designate, that board at the time felt strongly that the village should not be in the business of telling
right,
homeowners.
we passed that landmark law, but it was totally voluntary.
Exactly.
You could get landmarked if you were eligible and you volunteered. The board at that time decided that they did not want to say this building should be landmarked and there should
Right,
be
at some
different
point, we even
requirements.
discussed that, other people could make a nomination. We shied away from that as well. It had to be the
Right, and if
homeowner
they
coming
did,
to
you always had to have the consent of the homeowner.
I mean, and I would think that it would be hard to move from that kind of precedent. Yeah, right.
Well, yeah, one thing I was concerned about, and it's not fair, Randy, I know you're not an attorney and you're staying there like we're in a appellate court. And I'm gonna say,
Lots of lawyers on
and I
this side.
fully admit what I'm about to say sounds like I'm being an appellate judge, and I apologize for that. I'm not putting it on you. I think it's for everyone to think about is, from a logical point of view, your suggestion is airtight. In other words, if we're protecting the historical district, we should also protect the historical buildings of significance, right? I get that. But from a legal point of view, what would stop, and you always have to think worst case scenario, the Irvington Historical Society to designate every building in the village of Irvington to be historically significant, which would make it law that it would be completely applying to everyone. And do you see what I'm saying? In other
Well,
words,
except you have to adopt the list because they're a non-governmental agency.
Which
Right, so-
means, by the way, that we're then imposing our judgment, in
Okay.
effect, substituting for that. That's where I kind of have a problem. Do you really want me deciding, because the next issue could not be historic buildings, but some other aspect of buildings that we decide? Now, perhaps we have the power to do that in some circumstances.
But then
I'm like,
sorry.
I don't know that we do, but.
No, I'm being,
Yeah, I
that was
know.
tongue in
Okay.
cheek.
Yeah.
The list could never change that, or that would take the board to vote and to go through the process of a public hearing and everything to add or subtract a property property from the list, right, under that.
I would wait until they talk about that, but these buildings, I don't think the list is going to change. These are significant historically and culturally significant buildings.
But as time goes on, things become culturally significant. You know, in other words, history moves on and it opens up new areas of things that are historic. If you talk to a historian with a PhD, you know, they're only allowed to study. I had a guy from Cornell telling me that, you know, he was blasphemous because his study was 20 years before, and everyone told him that wasn't long enough. And as time goes on, you look at that period now that he was talking about, and everybody's studying it, because as time goes on, things become historically significant, right? So there's always going to be, it's always going to change. And properties are going to have things, if there's a fire, right, then that property isn't going to be historically significant anymore if it's gone. So there's going to have to be ways where it can't say this is the list, you know, forever, you know, bound in the village for the next 100 years plus. So the logic of what you're approaching this makes total sense. The question is, what is the legal way to get to that? And is there a legal way to get to that?
So if there's not, then I would caution about lifting the minimal protections we have right now.
It's a fair point. Something we have to consider.
And we're lifting it for the rear of the building and solar equipment, yes?
Which is important on a historic building.
The solar in the rear.
Actually, both.
Okay.
We've had a few of these solars come up on historic buildings, and they usually put them on the back. Nobody can see them on a flat roof, that sort of thing. So we've been kind of lucky. We haven't had to challenge anyone on that. But on the rear structures, it's critically important that somebody like the Odell Tavern, we don't want them to put a big glass structure on the back of it.
It sounds like the rear of the building is a bigger problem than the solar though, because people tend, I don't know why we want to put a giant solar panel on the front visible side of a historically significant building.
You'd be
Can we
surprised.
stop the Odell Tavern from doing that right now?
Sorry, what?
Can the village stop the Odell Tavern from doing something that's within their right to do?
It will come in front of us right now. With the law change, it won't come in front of us.
And if it comes in front of you, what effect do you have now?
Strong suggestion.
Right.
You know, and then public outcry at that point.
Well, it's also about context and compatibility.
I guess for me, I think I didn't explain it well as I thought. If someone changes the rear structure and ruins the look of the historically significant building, it's just for aesthetics. Whereas with solar panels, there's, you know, they're in the middle of a climate crisis, so there's really a much more compelling reason to allow that than there would be to let someone put the hideous glass structure on the back of a Odell Tavern. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I see those two issues as being separate. I think they need to be considered completely separately for the risk that you were talking about. When I said, if you said there's no law change that can affect that, then it's going to put things at risk. And I think my response is then, well, we need to judge, is the risk worth it here? Is the risk, it's not one size fits all, right? It's like, the solar taverns is very different than the backup structure in that regard. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So for solar on historic, we look to the National Park Service has guidelines on how to do that and how to deal with old buildings.
Although
So
I
those are clear.
think from our conversations that those are perhaps in our context a little extreme, which is why we have, am I correct, a separate village code. It's not, it doesn't adopt those national park regulations. There were some issues with that.
No,
Remember
but
correctly?
but the board certainly might take them into account if it's looking at a historic
Sure,
building.
the ARB can, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
But our indication back to the board was that those are stringent requirements.
Yeah.
And we weren't interested in doing that.
So that kind of leads into another comment I have on the solar. For solar installations, there's three categories of review. There's electrical, structural, which are the New York Building Code requirements. And then there's site plan review. And this list is from NYSERDA on how to do standard solar permitting. So right now, for site plan review, we have our zoning code solar installation guidelines, which is kind of like, it has some of the stuff from the NPS in there, guidelines on how to install, you know, where to install panels, how to arrange the design, where to put the electrical lines, electrical boxes, battery systems, that sort of thing. This law, as it's written, removes the ARB from site plan review outside the historic district, which means there's no site plan review.
There isn't
There's
right
no
now.
site plan now.
There's no site plan review of solar panels.
There is.
Maybe ground mounted, is that what you're
Oh, the
referring to?
ground mount.
No, the, what's this called? In the zoning code, what's the name of that thing? The solar panel installation guidelines that's for site plan review. It tells you where the electrical line should be
Right,
going.
right, the building department might apply them and the ARB could too. But the planning board does not review.
No, I'm sorry,
So-
it's not the planning, it's the ARB.
Oh, okay,
The ARB is charged
Yeah.
with site plan review of solar right now.
a review of it, okay.
Right, so
Okay,
it's,
site plan, it's just a
It's a
little
term of art,
confusing
yeah.
because site plan review is planning board review.
yes.
That's why we're
Yeah.
confused, yeah. But review, we just say review, yeah.
Right, so that review, under the way the law is written, will be removed outside the historic district. So placement of electrical lines, electrical boxes, the panel arrangement, all of that is no longer a code requirement under our code.
Yeah, it's a code requirement, but the building department would apply it.
It doesn't say that in the code.
Yeah, I think it says that, well, no, I mean, it
It's
wouldn't
governed
have
by
to
state
say. in the
building
code.
code.
Yeah,
By standard building
State
codes,
building
state
code.
building code.
then why do we have that guideline?
You,
Well, I
The
don't know,
ARB,
this,
yeah.
this is the way way I read it was that, that's it's electrical, structural is the building code, and the siting of all the components is our code.
yeah, but this also, the way it reads now, that's why I moved that, added that language, that all reasonable options have been considered to achieve compliance with the solar energy guidelines adopted by the Board of Trustees. So the use is only permitted if it meets those guidelines.
Okay, okay. I'm gonna move on. I mean, that sounds like a different document. Solar energy guidelines, is that the same one?
I think this is.
Oh, it is,
Yeah.
okay. Right. So as long as the building department's doing that plan review and it's covered. The last thing I was gonna mention real quick was the HOA reviews. The intent was for the residences in the condos. So their windows, their doors, decks, like things that are completely standardized. But we also see some common area structures that come up. Some like fences, retaining walls, whatever buildings. I would just ask that maybe you tweak that language to say residences, HOA residences. Something like that just refers so that these common areas will keep coming up in front of the ARB. Is that clear?
Can I understand the point, if I say it back to you to make sure I understand it, that what you're saying? So you're saying that like if an individual person wants to make changes on their condo, the HOA would look over that person and enforce those rules, so the
That's-
ARB
that-
wouldn't have to.
That's
But
what
if
they
the
do.
collective does something on the property that's not just for one home, there's nobody looking over that, because then the board could do whatever it wants.
Right.
With no overview, and there's lacking overview where there's overview by the board on the individual
Yes,
owners. That's what you're saying?
yes. I don't know how to write that up, but
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure. I
Small
understand your point. I want to think about it, because I think it's something worth thinking about, for sure.
Okay.
And I have another question, I guess. And maybe, so you're on the ARB, so then maybe I want to understand, like, in terms of what the ARB, the planning board, and the building department, it seems to me that maybe we need a little bit of understanding what each of those department, like, maybe a little bit of cross-training as to what each of you does, and like what these rules are. I think there seems to be some confusion as to what's covered by each department, right? I think what you were,
As to what?
as to like solar panels, and, because this discussion was a little
Well, it's pretty
confusing to me.
easy.
Okay,
Solar panels right now are reviewed by the ARB and also by the building department. Under this change,
Mhm.
the board asked me to draft, solar panels would no longer have ARB review, would only be building department unless they're in the historic district.
But there's, yeah, so my point was there's a task that has to be shifted to the building department.
Yeah. But
That just didn't seem to be spelled out.
it
Okay.
is.
I'm tr- I also want to your last point, I just want to make sure that we haven't done it already. You're concerned that the HOA might do something that overrides every residence within their plan, if you will, that's subject to their jurisdiction. And you want that reviewed, because the way this language works, it says every application for a building permit for construction, I'm just shortening it, of a 1 or 2 family dwelling or any structure in excess of 2,000 cubic feet, or for signs or solar energy walls or fences, shall be filed with the building inspector. So I'm not sure.
I think he's talking about
Go ahead.
B1.
B1. Okay,
Yeah,
reconstruction or alteration of any building in the community. Okay. So the idea is that they're gonna present 10 buildings.
No, it was, so we had one lately that came up. It was like an entrance to the condo
Like a
complex.
gatehouse or something.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
gatehouse.
Yeah.
Common
So
problem.
So it's a I got it, okay.
So you
Like
could
with
just-
examples of.
Okay.
That would be an easy change if the,
Okay.
it's just say reconstruction or alternation of any dwelling unit in the
Fine.
community.
Exactly.
I'm okay with
That's
that.
it.
You're
I got
saying
it.
if somebody
Thank you.
build a Taj
Thank you,
Mahal
thank
over
you.
a pool. that
Yeah,
wouldn't
that
fit in
sort of
very
thing.
well in the neighborhood, and there's no
Yes.
oversight because it's not an individual.
Or,
it's just
or
a
if
board
they,
doing
or
it.
if they change the siding on the whole complex, right? Because that's not, that would be like, they wouldn't have any, or that would be the HOA doing it to every unit, right? It
But
wouldn't-
they would have to go through the planning board for that, we're only talking about.
Well, they wouldn't, the way it's written necessarily, right? Because it's.
I think it's just taking it out of the art, what the
I-
architectural review board.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
We'll try to work that
I'm
in.
gonna let somebody else talk.
Yeah.
No problem.
Okay.
Thank you,
And I
Randy.
apologize for
Hold on.
putting you on the
Did you
spot
want it?
because you were
Yeah.
standing there.
Sorry, I'm only, okay, come on, just because that was his correspondence. so that's-
Thank you very much, Paul Fickle, our Irvington Landmark Preservation. So, our concern is taking the power away from the ARB and then having more power given to the building department. I certainly value our building inspector without a doubt, but I think his skills are more set towards construction rather than aesthetics. And the whole purpose of the Architectural Review Board is for aesthetics. And so I think they should have the deciding factor. You're putting it in here that provided the building inspector has certified that application is appropriate for the Board of Architectural Review. I don't know why he's the deciding factor on that. And we think also, according to my letter, that we really should like to see the Architectural Review Board have some architects on there. And if there's a conflict of interest, they could certainly raise their hand and mention that and step aside. But it is named the Architectural Review Board, and this is an aesthetic issue.
So
do you
I
think?
100% agree that I'd love to have local architects on there. Unfortunately, they have to give up their local practice to do it. And you can't have, at least my understanding of the ethics requirements, you can't have 2 architects on the board, one of whom says, okay, I'm interested in this, I'll step aside, you take care of it. And then when the job is, when the role is reversed, that's what they would call, at least in the legal realm, back scratching. And it's not what you want to
Right,
have
right.
for a public board.
Right.
If anybody knows of a local architect, someone who lives locally but does not have a local practice, I mean, I've tried to find people, believe me. So I'm happy to have the community's help because I think it would be appropriate to have someone with architectural background in the architectural review board.
And if they didn't reside in Irvington, that would be an issue?
Yeah.
Yes, as a public
Yeah.
officer. As a public officer, this board would need a public officer. No, they can't.
Okay. That being, as you said, I can't argue with that. But nevertheless, we still think the ARB should be the deciding factor, not regarding aesthetics, rather than the building department.
Which is, are you talking about just the solar panels? You're talking
Yes.
about, okay.
Well, and generally speaking, yes, but the
Right.
solar panels specifically, yes.
So although this kind of predated me and I inherited it, my understanding of where the board is coming from is that the community has repeatedly said, hey, things aren't moving at the pace it should as we go through all these approvals. I won't give you my personal opinion on that subject, but because I haven't had a problem, well, I guess I'm giving it. I haven't had a problem with that issue, but So I think the original intent was to change dramatically the role of the ARB, and we put that off to see if we couldn't come up with some interim solutions that might solve some of the problem. And now when we put those interim solutions out, they're being torn apart at the same time. I don't want to have to go back to the original proposal, which, if I can avoid it anyway, which was let's make dramatic changes. That's not, I'm not telling you I won't take your comments into account, but I just want you to understand my understanding of the history of this from the board's perspective.
I think that if the ARB had the time to do some due diligence and see what other municipalities are doing, because I'm sure that issue goes beyond just Irvington, and seeing if there's any other situations where we can look at those regulations and have the ARB make those suggestions rather than just the building department do that. I think homework and due diligence from the ARB would make sense.
If they want to do that, that's
Can
okay.
I mean, can I just?
Yeah.
How long, I mean, I feel like this process has been going on for a while. I think that
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
I feel like, has the ARB been asked for input?
100%. but
Okay,
The changes that are being made now are just based upon the letter from the ARB.
right.
But prior to that, there was a lot of requests for ARB input, right?
Yeah,
On the previous proposal.
The reason I asked if you were talking about the solar panels is because I think there's two different issues here, right? There's a bigger, larger discussion that the village is having now about what to do about the process with all of these things, with the ARB, with the planning board, and how can we make that process better. That's a discussion over here. And that discussion absolutely should involve questions of who do we want making these decisions, how do we want them making decisions, and I think that's a discussion that's going to be ongoing probably long after I'm not on the board anymore, right? It's something I think it's going to be continual. What's before us today that this public hearing is talking about is specifically having to do with the solar panels, and I think, and now I'm just speaking for me, right? And I'm saying it's like, for me, with the climate crisis, like, I think we should be doing everything we can to get as many solar panels up as possible, with the understanding that we have to be respectful of other issues, right? So we immediately, and I think it's why the ARB suggested it, and I know it's just a suggestion, but the reason why it was put in the letter is that clearly in the historic district, we can't have solar panels willy-nilly. We need an architectural review board to look at that. The question before us now is, what are we gonna do about solar panels, only solar panels, outside of the architectural district, right? So I don't think you were making a larger point, which I think is a great point, but I think in the specific context of the solar panels, that's what I think we need to decide now. And what needs to be looked at in those regards. And the back, that was in there also, that became part of the discussion. I'm less convinced by that because it's the climate crisis that has my attention. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
and it does make sense. However, I still disagree from the standpoint of aesthetics. I think that an architectural review board should be the deciding factor, not the building department. And I think, as Rick said earlier, he thought what was an issue that would be starting this dialogue where they would have some input rather than this is the end of the dialogue. So I think that the architectural review board probably does want to have some say in that.
Well, I'll say this much from what I've heard tonight. It's certainly worth another look at whether there's a way to capture the historic buildings outside of the historic district. That makes sense to me. If there are other specifics that we can, latch onto and do something about, then it's worth trying to incorporate that into the law. At some point, we're going to have to make a judgment that balances the overall process versus the to use your term, the aesthetics with regard to some of these buildings.
Right.
I mean, I want to say that I feel like maybe there was some disconnect along the way, and maybe we have some communication disconnect as to why we didn't get input earlier, because I do feel that, like, I sat in meetings over many months, and like, we didn't get feedback earlier, and that is a missed opportunity. So, maybe going forward, when we ask for input, we would get it earlier, not 2 years later. So I think that is an absolute miss, and we could have been having these conversations 2 years before, and all along, we wouldn't have to start now, we would have had to start before. So that, unfortunately, we are where we are, but it definitely, from my perspective, is a complete lost opportunity.
Anyway, your letter may have had more, so I don't want to.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank
your
you,
time.
Paul.
We appreciate it.
You know what? She just, Charlotte raised her hand before you're next.
Hi, Charlotte Benz, following on Mitch's point and not 2 years old, but new to what I've been looking at is the opportunity to implement a unified solar permit to streamline the process and actually go the other end of the spectrum. There's dozens of municipalities in the state who've already done this. I have a couple of examples here. It really simplifies the criteria and the process significantly so that we can get a lot more solar panels on a lot more houses. I mean, looking at the current design restrictions in place, I can tell you from my own solar panels that I wasn't allowed to have any, raised this much to improve my access to, the angle for the sun to maximize efficiency, even on the back of my house where literally nobody can see them. So to me, the current standards are too, they're egregious and they need to be stepped back. I don't understand why some of those standards exist at all. And I will say that they are, a unified solar permit gets us points for both climate smart communities tasks and clean energy communities. And there's a lot of money on the table right now for clean energy community points. So it's a giant win-win to move this one forward. And so I'm going to leave you with a couple of sample unified solar documents.
So just can you clarify, when you say unified solar permit administered by who?
There's a state's template that you can modify.
No, in Irvington, who would check?
Well, that would be the
permits
building
out?
department.
Okay, and then, so you're in that, I'm just trying to understand what you're saying. So
Yeah,
in
yeah.
our-
With
just
regard to
here-
the ARB, I have less of a strong opinion. To me, the simpler the better.
Okay, so you would not,
You would
you're not
remove it.
against this proposal, is what you're saying?
No, I bet
Okay.
simpler.
So
That's what that's what I was trying to get.
come find me in the next week or two and we can talk about this because.
Yeah. Sort of a separate thing.
Yeah, which is, okay,
But just while we're looking at changes, it's like, okay, now it's really, I got to get this on the agenda.
okay.
Yeah, okay.
Fair enough.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Earl?
Did you want me to wait for the correspondences from the?
No, I think I let them cover it
No,
unless they
it's
want to hear me drone on and reading their letters, but.
It's quite all right. I'm Earl Ferguson. I've been known to be an advocate for historic preservation in the village now my whole life here, really. And I still am, I suppose, very much so. I just wanted to offer some clarification on the subject of how did we arrive at a list of historic buildings. And wanted to say that the listing that was sent from the Historical Society Preservation Committee, as well as from the Irvington Landmarks Preservation, was done, it was a compilation that was done by the Preservation Committee based on information that we have had for decades, really. The first portion of the list is properties listed on the New York State and National Registers of Historic Places. There are 10 of them that are straight out listed on the National Register, including the Irvington Historic District. So any contributing building in the historic district is considered listed on the National Register. The whole district is listed on the National Register and should have whatever protections that we can provide for those buildings. There's a lot of laws that we've worked on over the years to put that in place. There's another, the Odell Tavern, for instance, is recognized by New York State, the State Historic Preservation Office, as eligible for listing on the National Register. And all that means is that the state has already recognized it. And if the owners were to follow through with an application to the National Register, it's most likely that it would be listed on the National Register. So just being recognized by the state alone as a significant historical property should give us, some means by which to offer some modicum of protection of it, but certainly not without the owner's consent. That's just the way the law is written. There are other municipalities who just believe it's in the public's best interest to protect these buildings without necessarily the owner's consent. But our law provides for owner's consent. Some portion of the list, there's 2 buildings that are listed on the Westchester County inventory of eligible landmarks. So that's one of the reasons we included that. That's two buildings that are not in the historic district. The Odell Tavern is not in the historic district. And then there's some 37 other properties that are listed by the Irvington Historical Society as eligible landmarks. Now, there's criteria laid out in the local landmark law as to what represents, a local landmark, or what criteria do we use to determine whether a building is just an old building or whether it's making a significant contribution to the historical character of the village as a whole. And you can just go up and down Broadway and find them. So there's some 37 that have been listed. And among them are those wonderful, the Ardsley train station is a big one. And then there are those lovely gatehouses along Broadway. I'm not going to mention all of them, but I just wanted you to know that this was not just a willy-nilly collection.
I did for a moment think it was arbitrary.
And on it is the Franklin mile markers, the Halsey Pond Tea House, the Murray Griffin Estate, the Nevis, the Hamilton House, Nevis, the Presbyterian Church. I'm not going to list all of them. Strawberry Hill Manor, the Tiffany Cottages, for instance. None of these are on the in the historic district. What is the other one? The Nevis, I mentioned Nevis. There's another one that's on this list that I can't find right now. But this list was the last section that I'm referring to. The properties listed by the Historical Society as eligible landmarks. That most of these, if not all of them, were listed by the Irvington Historical Society Preservation Committee some 50 years ago. And so over all of these decades, they've always been in our archives as recognizable structures that lend a significant character to the village as a whole.
So Earl, with all due respect to this list, do the houses that are currently on this list, are they allowed to be treated differently right now by the ARB than any other house that's not within the historic district, that's not on that list?
Well, I can't cite the code right now, but the code that authorizes the ARB talks about the historical integrity of buildings. It talks about contextual relationships to the neighborhood. It's about the character of the neighborhood as well. It's not just one building necessarily that has to be taken into account. And it's a compatibility with the neighborhood, a contextual compatibility of a design. And as Randy mentioned, that's really what design review is about. That's why it's so important. So I would hope that the ARB, as long as we can keep an ARB in place, would be able to take a building's historical integrity into account. Of course, it isn't, the attempt would not be to ignore the owner's wishes. I mean, all of that would be incorporated. I was on the ARB for 10 years and I chaired it for 6 years. We had recusal in those days. And so if an architect sat on the board and there was an appearance of a conflict of interest, there was that architect, which was myself and perhaps one other, from time to time, would recuse. And that's typical of many other municipalities. It shouldn't necessarily be architects. We'd have to look at attorneys, realtors, really. So just to end this, I wanted to read a note that was attached to the end of the list that was sent out to you. Most of the above historic properties were designated on March 18th, 1976, by the Irvington Historical Society Landmarks Committee, founded in 1972. Some buildings included in the original documentation have been lost through neglect or aggressive development. Many remain extant as irreplaceable historic places available for education and inspiration of future generations. However, if they're not given some modicum of protection, these sites are vulnerable to neglect, inappropriate development, demolition, or severe alterations that would foreclose on future eligibility for landmark nomination. So we do have a little bit of protection through an ARB review.
Okay, so I think going back to Randy's suggestion, Miriam, can you just take a look at it's Bellevue, Washington? Was that the location? Bellingham, forgive me. Just take a look at it and we can talk about it and see if there's something we can pull out of that, if possible, that might cover these buildings. I don't want to open us to some legal challenge, so we can have that conversation if that's necessary. And we'll see what we can do if it's possible.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Anybody else on this particular subject?
Hi, David Zweibel. I just want to, one, to Mitch's point on solar, I want to talk about solar and I want to talk about the ARB. On the solar, everything needs to be done to get as much solar as we can where it's appropriate and put it up and do it. And it's absolutely crazy that we don't have, all of the other side of the railroad tracks with solar panels on it, all over the place. Lots of places for it. But having said that, I'm very concerned about not having someone who has an aesthetic judgment on the placement of the solar panel outside the historic district as well. And I feel it is a straw man to suggest, one, that we can't have recusal on our architectural review board. If that's the case, why should any lawyer be allowed on any board? Why why should
I
any
don't
accountant?
practice locally.
Uh,
I don't practice at all.
Right. Who does practice locally? Yes. And several communities in Westchester have architects on their various boards. And if that's a stop, that's the village is choosing to not have an expert look at something that affects the property values of the entire village. And yes, I agree that we shouldn't be burdening owners. On the other hand, the reason we have the property values we do is that when you drive down Broadway and you look and you see this building, you see that building, et cetera, people say, I want to live in this community because look at all these lovely buildings here. Which
Until they want to make changes in their own house.
until they want to make changes in their own house, or what's even more fearsome is the developer comes along and sees this nice lot and will just tear the whole thing down. And we have lost a couple of buildings to development that way. And the yellow house here on Main Street, that was a hair's breadth away.
But that's not solar panels, we're talking about solar panels.
No, we're talking about the general
Going
ARB.
to the philosophy of having an ARB.
Right. And if we can't have an architect, the village is hiring a lawyer to review legal documents. Minimally, if you're going to eliminate ARB looking at something, minimally you should hire an architect to look at it, someone who has a professional degree, as opposed to, I trust our building department to understand how the plumbing works.
So we've talked about that, right? We've talked about about that. We've exactly talked about hiring a professional because we've had this issue of not having someone and not an architect on the ARB. So we have talked about that.
But again, that's a bigger discussion.
That's a bigger discussion,
It's not
but,
right for
That's in
tonight.
it.
She's like-
okay, but right for tonight.
Yeah, that was in the, that was
Okay,
in our previous.
on this specific issue, solar panels outside of the historic district, we need to improve that process as we knew with all of the building department permitting issues. And
Right, and keep the cost of that process down, and adding an architect's not going to keep the cost of the process down for the homeowner.
Because they pay for it.
indeed, and that's part of the problem. People come to this village because they like the fact that our energy codes are what they are, and they've added to the cost of building anything.
We also like that our zoning codes are the way they are. We're trying to change that as well.
Exactly. But the not having any criteria for a visual standard of where you can place a solar panel in the village in certain neighborhood contexts, that can be a problem.
But we're not talking about having no criteria. We're not talking about having no criteria, are we?
The guidelines are already in
Guidelines are
there.
there.
Okay.
There's solar energy equipment guidelines.
Yeah.
That's
But
what
are
Charlotte
they-
found on her house, she couldn't have it higher than she wanted.
Right.
Quite a lot of that.
The problem
Yes.
is we have too much regulation.
I feel like we're
Not-
rolling out of.
I know, so the focus, I understand.
No, my focus is, I would just love to see,
But on
And we
February
haven't even
28th,
gotten to
we're
the
not even,
appointment.
Like, do you know what I'm saying? In other words.
I'm looking at you,
this
you're trying to
discussion
get
that you're having is a super
appointed.
important discussion
We have
that
a
will happen
budget.
over the next months, years probably, as we try and figure out this process. But with the solar panels, I think what Charlotte was saying was there are, and obviously Mary Ann also, is there are lots of regulations right now as to what people can
Yeah.
do with solar panels, to the point that Charlotte was saying hers are not as effective as they could be because she has to comply with regulations that already exist. So all we're talking about here is ARB review of solar panels
Yeah.
outside of the historic district. That's all that's being discussed tonight. Nothing else is being taken away
Right.
or you know what I mean? That
And
is-
we will take a look back at what we can do about
Yeah.
historic
Yeah.
buildings.
That's a critical one.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, David.
Greg, I see you shifting in your chair. Does that mean you're ready to come up again, or
Wait and see, the last person.
Anybody else?
I just want to clarify something.
okay, come on up and clarify. I don't see anybody else jumping up.
At one point during the conversation, Larry was asked, how long has this particular subject been going on? And Larry quickly said 2 years. What Larry's referring to is the interaction between the building department, a legal department, and the ARB. And we've had many meetings. It's not like nothing happened in those 2 years.
Yeah, we know. We're not.
I know you know, but
we're
not everybody knows.
Okay.
As far as, I mean, on this issue, I can tell you firsthand that we have been talking about this process since 2010 and 2011 when I sat in that corner seat right there. So it's been going on a long time. 2 years is just the amount of time that the building department has been involved making, suggestions as to how we can streamline processes. And, we sat in many meetings to discuss these processes, and here we sit. So I just wanted to clarify
Okay.
that.
We should remember, Mark Gillian was really the person when he was on the board that started this level of the conversation, because when he was, what liaison.
And I was on the year before he got on.
Bottom line is, I recognize that everybody excepting village staff is a volunteer here and on all the boards, so we appreciate what you do, and nobody wants to malign anybody. We're just trying to come to a good result, period. Okay, going, unless anybody else has another comment on this particular, should I make a motion to continue the hearing?
You don't need to do a motion for that. Right.
Okay.
It's gonna just stay open.
Continue. Okay, stay open. On to the next item, which is the appointment of the superintendent of recreation, so that we can immediately shift to your budget and start attacking you for that.
Proclamation for her patience.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Finally.
I will give the resolution, the motion. Resolved to provisionally appoint Maureen DePauli as superintendent of recreation at an annual salary of $140,000 effective March 2nd, 2024. That's my motion. Anybody want a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Congratulations.
All right, next up is,
No speech.
you're welcome.
She'll have plenty to say, don't worry.
Yeah. Otherwise, we're moving your budget to last on the agenda.
I was just making a
Next up is salary modifications in the Recreation and Parks Department, then we'll go to the budget. And they are effective March, I'll do this as a resolution. Resolved to make the following salary modifications in the Recreation and Parks Department effective March 2nd, 2024. Michael DiNardo, 89,926. Angela Thornton, 89,926. Laura Copeman, 81,274. And CJ Riley, 81,274. Do I have a second for that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Congratulations to everybody else in the right department. Okay, now we are on to the budget workshop for Rec and Parks. I guess if you folks want to come up. Is that-
There's plenty of seats, however you want to do it.
Yeah, whatever you want, but you're
So
welcome to.
before we start, I just want to recognize that there's a lot of people in the audience. Some of them represent staff that's here to help to discuss the budget, but a lot of them represent residents who are part of the many committees that this budget affects. And these are all residents who are taking more time out of their schedules, and I just want to let them know that I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I think we all appreciate it.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. When they're settled, I guess, Katie, you want to
Boy,
give us
lightning
your,
strikes right now.
Oh, no, I'm okay. You're good. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess I'll start by highlighting any changes that we have, and maybe we'll do like parks and then questions and then recreation and questions and just take it piece by piece. So the park salaries line, reflects the contractual increase in salaries. The 2 parks employees are part of CSEA. The personnel services overtime line, this reflects the 3.5 salary increase that's in the union contract. The labor line decrease of 28,000 is for the 1-year addition of the part-time groundskeeper to train the groundskeepers, which we covered by an appropriation of fund balance last year. The additional 6,100 is less parks overtime hours needed based on the analysis that the department did. The park equipment line, there's a request for an increase of 3,000, and that's for a 5,000 for a new water fountain and 2,000 in batteries for electric equipment. So that's a 7,000 in addition, but only 3,000 additional is requested because we'll use some of the existing budget to cover that. The beautification line shows an increase of 14,200, but this is just movement. It was originally in the celebrations budget. We're just moving the 14,000 because the beautification committee does the greening of the village. The other operating and maintenance expense line, an addition of 6,600 is requested for tree maintenance and spraying expenses. On the professional fees line, there's an increase of 250 for AquaTurf irrigation, 4,500 for the geese control fees. So this isn't added services that are included. This just reflects the current level of service that we have and what it has been costing us. The 5,300 is just breaking out our storage unit rental expense that's on this line. There's a 5,000 reduction in the Musco Lights expense, and this is based on historical expenses and gives us some room for any repairs needed. In next year's budget, we'll probably need to do the full replacement, but that's that can be held off another year.
Is it the sports field lighting in Scenic Hudson Park?
There's also another 5,000 in reduction in the amount of Halsey Pond treatment needed. The amount that's, you know more about that, right?
Yeah,
Did something good happen there, or?
Well, no, it's an amount.
It's not as expensive.
It's an amount that was.
I'm always walking around it, so I.
It's an amount that was appropriated in the past. We were going to undertake a kind of a special treatment to try to improve the water quality there, but it really hasn't panned out as being needed at this point. Obviously, if things happen in the future, we'll reassess it.
And then the 10,000 increase in utilities is based on the HVAC changes that were made at the senior center. So it'll now be on the NYPA bill that's connected with the parks, and then we'll see the corresponding savings in the senior center line.
Oil. In
And
reduction,
oil.
in reduction
Yeah.
in heating oil, right?
So there's environmental and financial incentives to make that change.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to do questions
Why
on
don't you-
the parks
unless
budget or
anybody
keep
objects, you wanna
going
do the whole
through.
summary, and then
Okay.
we can sort of go through the, is that okay with everybody? Okay.
Okay. So then recreation, we have some revenue changes, some increases. So summer camp, we have a 40,000 increase in revenue, and this is based on prior year enrollment levels, and there were also some fee increases. Same thing with Teenscape, we have a 20,000 increase in revenues. Sponsorships, we took out the 15,000 sponsorship revenue line because we haven't really been getting that. We're adding 10,000 for revenues in the rental of the multi-purpose court, which will undergo construction. A decrease in 2,000 in kayak rack revenues, and that's based on actual revenues we've been bringing in. And an addition of 5,500 for the rental of the senior center, because rentals can now resume due to the HVAC repairs. And there's a 250 per community advisory board meeting that gets charged.
Can I ask a question about the increase in revenues for rental of the multi-purpose court?
Mhm.
When does the capital projects start, the reconstruction? And does that not impact that, or am I conflating two issues? Sorry,
Yeah.
construction.
Right, yeah, so I don't have an exact schedule for you. The bids were actually received today, and they so far look pretty good,
So, but does this not reflect, I mean, in other words, the construction will be done quickly enough that this is a realistic increase in revenue?
So we're hoping it'll be done sometime in the summer, which will allow us to have fall programs and then spring programs in '25. So we'll have pickleball lessons and volleyball at first glance. So it should be exciting.
Well, you know, all I'm suggesting is don't set yourself up for failure.
Don't count on them.
If you should find when the bids are open that this is not a good number, you should let us know, that's all.
No problem. Hopefully it's easier to put in a multi-purpose court than an HVAC system in the senior.
Yes, we hope.
we're hoping.
Okay. And then another line in recreation that maybe we can discuss at the end. So we have 9,000 in senior citizen revenues, which we haven't been meeting. So I think we need to kind of decide whether or not we're going to charge for services, or if not, then we should probably take that out as well.
Where is that line? I don't see that one.
It's not, I didn't make any changes,
Oh,
so it's
gotcha,
not on
okay.
the summary, but on the recreation fees, it's listed there at
I'm
9,000.
sorry, I misunderstood.
So for the expenses, the recreation salaries, it's a decrease of 11,768, and that's based on Joe's retirement, and then other
The
staffing
changes we just
salaries
made,
that
yeah.
were just made. There's a request for 1,500 to be included on an overtime line that's been previously budgeted at 0. For camp, we're increasing the part-time labor by 52,250, and this is offset by the increased revenues. And we did some moving. So we have summer camp separated from labor. So there's a summer camp line and then the camp part-time labor. So we just kind of move things around a little bit to reflect the actual costs. So that's why there's a negative or a decrease of 12,000 under summer camp, because 16,000 in labor costs were moved to the part-time line. And then additional 2,000 was added in special event and trip costs. Teenscape part-time labor, we increased by 5,000 based on enrollment numbers. And increasing non-labor Teenscape costs by 10,000 for an increase in transportation and trip fees. And those two lines are also offset by the increase in revenue. Supplies line, we're moving 4,295 from supplies onto its own copier lease line. For program annual maintenance and subscriptions, there's an increase of 1,150 for the Capture Point online fees that are charged. Special events, there's 3,500 added for an egg hunt, and 5,000 in tree lighting expenses removed from the celebrations line onto this line.
Why was the tree lighting moved out of celebrations?
Because the
Yeah.
recreation department runs it essentially.
Right, and it was really part and parcel with all the other greening of the village. It's done by the beautification committee. It's kind of all one function.
I just, because we were having a lot of talk about celebrations and budgets and things like that, but I guess moving into a different budget line doesn't stop the conversation, so that's.
Not
Right.
No, it wasn't intended to do that. This is really just more of a management thing.
The 500 in information technology expenses are covered as a town hall department line as a whole, so it's not needed there. The increase in part-time labor of 32,000 is reflective of the recreation part-time labor expenses. Adult softball, baseball, we can decrease that line by 5,000, which is also reflective of current expenses. Youth programs, an increase of 7,000, and adult programs, a decrease of 36,400.
What are the non-staffing related expenses?
So, I mean, well, I'll have them, they can talk more about the expenses. I know Maureen and I, right before this, discussed the adult program.
Basically for
Expenses.
supplies, like equipment, sporting equipment, balls, all kinds of balls, tennis balls, pickleball basketballs, volleyballs, tennis equipment, nets. When we get the pickleball going, we'll have to get like equipment for that, paddles, nets. Anything else you guys wanna add to it? Oh, you're a contractor.
So when we use an outside contractor to run the program,
Okay.
they're paid from the non-staff.
Because they're not staffed.
Yeah,
that
but
makes sense.
it's a significant chunk of the cost.
I was gonna say that, really, because I'm thinking that's a lot of balls and stuff, and then when you
Yeah,
said that,
yeah,
it's like, okay.
And that's for the pickleball.
Yeah, that's the
pickleball.
adult
Like
pickleball.
instruction.
Yeah, because I know for all, I mean, my son used to do a lot of those youth programs when he was younger, and I know there's always these outside vendors who
Yeah.
came in, and so you gotta pay for them, so. Okay, thank you.
You reference, sorry, Katie, you still going, or you're?
I mean, there's
Okay.
more, but you can chime in.
Okay, there, you reference a storage rental unit expense, it's 1.7140.437 to the Parks Department. Can somebody just tell me what that is? It's 5,300.
Oh wait, which line are we on?
If you go to your summary.
Oh,
it's near
there's-
the first page.
There's a Westies storage unit that's used, and then there's a pod outside of the senior center
Yeah,
that's
that's-
also used.
Got it. And that's just stuff that we can't fit anywhere else.
We're gonna evaluate how it's being used
Okay.
and see what we can do.
It's fine, I mean,
to-
you
yeah.
have good
But it has been
reason
like
to
for
use it, but-
beautification, our
Yeah.
Christmas, like holiday,
Yeah.
other equipment and special event things, so.
If you've been in the rec, you know we don't have lots.
No,
Well, we
was thinking
spoke-
that as a.
we are
as a
gonna-
Churches
drastic-
weren't known for big storage areas.
Yeah.
so-
Yeah, we're definitely gonna look at that.
And, let's see here, now I gotta find it myself. 1.7310.160, camp part-time, 55,000 increase in revenues, is that just additional, well, this is expense, you just tell me that's an offset?
Yes, so we moved,
And it's an offset because you expect increased revenues?
it's partially because of revenues, and then some labor expenses used to be recorded in the regular camp line. So we moved everything around so that all camp part-time expenses are specifically on this line, and all non-labor expenses are on their own line.
But the assumption is that there will be additional campers, what creates that additional revenue?
It's based on
anybody
actuals
can
from
anticipate.
last year, anticipating enrollment will stay as high as it was last year.
Yeah, previous years, and this year was a great year, and we're increasing our fees as well.
Got it.
So,
How big is the increase?
$100 of course.
What's the camp?
Well, there's multiple fees. So for one child village is $13.80, that's for 5 weeks. But then we have a 3-week option and a 5-week option. And then we have our village school district non-resident, then we have 1 child, 2 children, 3 children, so it's different.
God, I've lived here for,
formula.
I've lived here for a long time, so I think it was like 700 and something
Yeah.
when my kids.
But it hasn't really, if you compare over the years,
Yeah.
it's really not.
It's still a
Yeah.
bargain.
I mean, that's still a huge
You
bargain.
know, we've added time,
Do
you
you
know,
do the
and
after camp, like the extra time thing still, or no?
we do extended day.
Extended day, yeah, I could think of it.
It's gonna be 1:45 to 3:45, yeah.
And there's a fee for that.
So you can go 9 to 3:45.
And how are the camp fees set? Was it, RPAC was involved
We
in?
meet with the RPAC,
Mhm.
and we all discuss it. And I know RPAC's very in tune, like not to raise the fee too much because it's a camp for our children in the summer and it's important. So they've always been very supportive and we agree on a fee and then we go from there.
And Teenscape is a little bit different in terms of your philosophy, right? I remember from our meetings. So in terms of setting the fees, right? So how are they structured?
I know you. Sorry, you want me to?
Either one.
Since it's a specialty camp, and we need to cover the cost, and the fee is based on the actual cost of the trips and the bus, and the staffing, of course. So it's based on the actual cost.
And there's also a cap on it, so that makes it, where, say camp, we try to take everyone within reason. But Teenscape has a certain number of spots that they, because of the bus.
Session 1 filled in 10 minutes yesterday, 40 kids. And there's currently, I believe, 6 or 8 spots left in session 2. So we even had to cut out 6th graders this year because so many 8th graders got turned away last year within minutes. So those 6th graders will probably be reflected in the day camp numbers too going up.
It's great. Not great to have to turn people away, but it's great that it's in demand. We have as I understand, a potential retirement and directing the director of seniors, yes.
I mean, I think there's potential, but we're still working all through that.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine. So there's nothing that would reflect anything of that nature in this?
No, there's no
Okay.
changes.
No.
Okay, got it. I'm not chasing anybody out, it was just a more of a.
No, of course.
Yeah.
Are you?
Let's see.
Oh, yeah. Do you want me to continue
Sure.
with the senior? Okay. So the senior program line, the increase of 1,977 is just reflective of current salaries. The 1,000 on the overtime line is never used because the senior center is usually open 4 days a week, so there hasn't really been a need for the overtime line. The labor line, the increase of 1,323 is reflective of the current rates. And the decrease in the heating oil, natural gas of 9,000 is because of the switch over to electric and the increase in the parks department.
Yeah, and we don't even know how those numbers are going to come out because we're experiencing it right now, but we took our best guess.
Yep.
Oh, and the celebrations, the 5,000 in the tree lighting expenses and the 14,000 in the greening of the village. Those are the ones we moved out of the celebration line and into the beautification and special events lines. We didn't include the rest of the celebrations budget in this presentation in hopes it can be its own discussion. So that's not part of this. Then we have the Irvington Woods Park, the personnel services, the 11,059 is reflective of current salaries. $7,500 in part-time labor expenses were moved to the overtime line. So then on the corresponding part-time line, the decrease is because of the movement to the overtime line, and then the remaining 4,000 was moved to repairs and maintenance of buildings. So this change is to reflect the current programming that's being ran and the part-time needs within the nature center. The telephone line, it's not needed, that's covered under the general town hall telephone expenses. Professional fees of $4,550. It was adjusted based on estimates of work needed for this fiscal year, in addition to $1,450 being added for the deer management 2-year density study. The decrease of $1,000 in custodial services is based on our current contract with the cleaning service. The increase of $7,500 in repairs of maintenance and buildings is for repairs to exterior aspects of the building, such as replacing missing rod and cedar wall planks, power washing, fixing gutters, and exterior restaining work needed on the building, and an additional $10,000 for hazardous tree work.
This is a total non sequitur, but I have questions about. You have a couple categories of meals, which I have no objection to, but you, rather than make you run from line to line, CAB, for example, has food for 10 meetings, and then you've got, I think it was for the Woods, breakfast and lunch for events and so on. Am I correct that wherever there's food, you've tried to allocate it to whatever particular department or grouping within your realm?
It's basically for the volunteers when they help with a program.
Got it.
Yeah. So if they're helping, the beautification helps green the village, that'll be their separate line item for that. And then the Woods, excuse me, CJ has, well, he can explain if you like. He has people come and students come on Saturdays. You want to just talk briefly?
Sure. So
we've talked about
so
it.
unfortunately, we can't pay them with money, so we pay for your services in Dunkin' Donuts.
Try to find something healthier, but that'll do.
And pizza, but we get a good amount of them. So
Thank you. Line 1.7140.010, which is page 2 of 13, it's Saturday, Sunday, holiday, and call-outs. It's got over $50,000. What's the principal driver of that? And that's
Parks overtime?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, is that just events? I mean, what is it that's
Just emergency work, emergencies, if they're called out, they're guaranteed a certain amount of hours. So it's just basically a safety net, right? So that we have.
Well, that part of the description, but I think the rest of it is there's a routine on weekends
Weekends when they come in.
to prepare fields and to.
So there's a baseball game or something, and they've got to.
Right.
Clean the bathrooms, make sure the parks are ready to go.
Right, and that's a 7-day-a-week
Yeah,
thing in the summertime, not necessarily in the middle of winter.
Got it.
But certainly in the summer. So that's a good portion of that, and those are, they, even if, that we don't schedule it so that their work is completed in an hour, but let's say they could do their work in an hour, they would still get paid 4 hours for that. So under the contract, so it's clearly they're scheduled more than that to.
They have like a
Follow up to
set-
this, is this, oh,
Go ahead.
is this like all weekend work? Like if, for example, if there's someone at the gate at Matheson Park, is that where the labor costs would go? Or is this is just for overtime?
This is just for our parks men that come in, our groundskeepers. So they'll have like a list of duties to do on a Saturday and Sunday, which involve checking all the facilities, lining the fields if there's games, Matheson Park scenic, taking care of all that stuff, the garbage, making sure there's no repairs. That would be basically their Saturday and Sunday work.
So this really applies to two
Part-time.
employees, right?
It's, yeah,
Yes.
it's 2 of the prime seasons, and then I think those
It's
2.
usually, when it's like winter or whatever, there's one man on
No, I meant a
Saturday,
total that it
Sunday.
affects.
But
You're
there's
talking about
Yes.
the
two
two,
full-time,
yes, two
two
people.
full-time.
So it doesn't include any of like the part-timers or
No,
that,
this is
that's not
just our
really-
two
okay.
full-time.
The part-timers are in the next line down.
Yeah, I
here.
was just following up from what Larry was saying to clarify for me and for everybody.
I went down too far.
Line, well, it's in the Parks Department and you don't have to find the line, but you have lines for picnic tables and benches and grills and things. Are those just replacement numbers for things that wear away?
Yes. So this time of year, actually before the spring, our Parks Department will do like an inspection of all our parks and see which benches need to be repaired, the grill, we have grills, the water fountain, just make sure that's working. Basically the benches. So we just ordered 5, correct?
Right, and 3 are not in good shape.
3 are not in good shape, so they'll be replacing them.
And then 2 are gonna go to Station.
And we're adding 2 for Station Road.
Right,
Because
so
now
stay-
that that's back up, we're gonna
Right.
try to enhance that area.
And if you're familiar with how Station Road was regraded and restructured, there's a really nice open green space there that didn't really exist before. But as a result of the drainage project that we did out there, that was the net result. And so they're gonna put some picnic benches out there.
Because there was
It's
a
perfect
splash
spot.
pad there, I don't know if you remember
But the
that.
splash pad's gone.
And that's gone, so we have more, like Larry said, more green
Yeah.
space.
It's begging for some picnic benches.
Yeah,
If you go
it's
by, you'll see.
something. Yeah.
Yeah.
In, let's see, it's adult and youth part-time labor and camp part-time labor, which is 1.7310.0123. It's some decent sized jumps from what it was. Are those in both cases just the anticipated increase in children or young or adults who are participating? And you're anticipating?
I can answer that
Oh,
one.
okay.
So, in prior years, the, all part-time expenses were lumped in with all non-labor costs on the youth program line and the adult program line. So we broke them out. So you'll see on, the adult program line, for example, last year it was budgeted at 39,000 and this year it's only budgeted at 2,600 because the labor expenses were removed.
Oh, got it, okay.
It's really a reallocation. that's all.
Okay. Just to see if I'm paying attention. Somewhere there's a reference to something, SCIDA, that's just
SCADA.
software, SCADA,
That's our tennis registration software.
tennis registration, okay.
And
Thanks.
the tennis court facility,
Yes,
yeah. Yep. And that's gonna be used for the new multi-purpose
Yeah.
court, I believe, for scheduling purposes, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so all 3 tennis courts and the 2 courts at Scenic.
So it kind of keeps you out of the middle of it?
Since we've switched to it, it's really limited the issues, when you show up, you're gonna get a court, you have time to play.
Is there any consideration of just letting dogs in the park, so we save $11,500 on the geese? Remediation.
When we get to the capital budget, we're gonna have that
Yes.
conversation, which is
Yeah.
a different conversation when we get to the
I mean,
dog
I'm just
park
thinking
discussion.
dogs will
It's
solve
there, just as a backward.
Yeah.
Just let people walk their dogs in there.
Like the geese go.
Sorry, I just have to find my own numeric references here. What do we do for window decorating on the special events?
Okay, so that was a program we had years ago.
Yeah.
And we brought it back with the Girl Scouts who helped co-sponsor it. So we used the windows on Main Street. And we don't paint directly on the window. We use poster board because it's just easier for, cleanup and things like that. So it's no judging. It's strictly participation. And, we spend like a Saturday morning. They register and then they go to a window and they paint. And then the Girl Scouts, we co-sponsor together. We'll like just give them cookies and soda or juice or whatever. And they make up treat bags.
So
It's just participation and fun.
Got it. So the expenses for the supplies and the.
Yeah, like the paint, the paper, all the paper products, and you have to have staff, actually. We have our parks men that will work to put the paper on the windows in the morning. Then we have staff that walk around on Main Street, like giving out extra paint or making sure everybody's.
These from the store windows.
This is on our Main Street.
Oh, I thought you meant the rec building. All right, never mind.
No, and like our first year, it was very kind of limited because it was like a last minute thing, and we just had like younger children. But last year we extended the ages, so it was kind of cool. It was like the whole Main Street, and we want to do it again. Like the Girl Scouts are ready to sponsor.
It's like the Arrangements for Everyone posters that are in the windows. It's kind of a similar thing.
Yeah, like if you looked at
Yeah.
Halloween, a lot of them left them up. They even left them up like in November. A lot of the stores. At the
It was for
firehouse.
Halloween.
Yeah, Halloween weekend.
And my son did it last year and had a lot of fun doing it, so thanks. That was great.
Oh, good. You're welcome. Yeah, it's fun. We brought that back.
Should somehow loop the bands in.
Self-promotion,
You should somehow
have I
loop
ever
the
heard?
bands into that.
Just the drummers. The non-staffing expense, I guess, is for adult programs. One, and maybe this is the flip, well, I won't even try to guess what this is. 1.7310.499 dropped dramatically. So I'm sure that just went somewhere else, right?
To the part-time labor line.
Okay, got it.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I gotta scroll through and find my own markings here.
Have you guys considered any like street fairs on Main Street?
That's something I'd be interested in discussing, yes. Years ago as well, we used to have like a May fling, like when the chamber was very active in Irvington. They would have like a fall event, they do a spring event.
Like sidewalk sales or something.
Sidewalk
yeah.
sales, they put red balloons outside their stores, and it was
School was
really
involved as
nice.
well.
Yes, school, yes, it's definitely something we'd be interested in.
And I think we really just thinking about just bringing activity to Main Street, and I mean, I think the painting the windows and things for kids are good, but like full family events and like bringing just more foot traffic and people to Irvington, like to help the businesses and like,
Not on a Sunday.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but like would be a
Yeah.
good,
Can I
what's
suggest
necessary.
if you do something like that, bring in the other, in other words, get the library involved because they're
Right.
at one end of
Yes,
it.
because they're down,
You
yeah,
get the theater involved because it's gonna be
Yeah.
newly opened and it's right along the way here.
definitely.
And, and then maybe the historical society for the top of the hill,
Right.
and that way we have the whole thing covered there is,
That's,
Yeah.
yep.
If you do it, we will help. So we're not
Yeah.
just giving you
Okay.
ideas.
No, right.
Yeah,
And you know how I feel about working with the other,
Yes.
that's my big,
and I
so,
agree with you.
yes, I'll be reaching out to you to set the meeting with
I'm looking forward to it.
So sorry to go back to the mundane stuff, the drop in heating oil and natural gas is what you explained before.
In
Yeah.
senior
Center.
senior
Yeah.
center, yes.
It's
Yes,
replaced by
yeah.
electricity,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little confusing because the heating oil, we're able to allocate directly to the senior program for the senior center building. The electric, we can't because there's one meter in the entirety of Scenic Hudson Park. And it covers the ball field lights and it covers the senior center. There's one meter. So, yeah, so we can't allocate that out to different departments. So it's all the electric is in parks.
Oh, yeah, I had to pick one, right?
Well, listen, it was built 25 years ago. I don't know what to tell
That's
you.
just hilarious to me.
Yeah. So it doesn't, it's not good for budgeting, but it's, you know, it all works, so that's the important thing.
I guess I have a question. Lifeguards and water safety, do you take your own lifeguards?
No, so
classes?
that was left in the budget, like it's just itemized that way, but now what we do is, because we don't use the Ardsley pool anymore, we bring in water, like we bring in the slides. We do a lot of water activities, we do like carnivals with water, so we have to hire companies to bring in things. So we kind of basically use that money to compensate, since we don't have a pool.
So the-
Like for our activities.
We'll actually change that title,
Yeah,
just
that
to
should
be more clear about it. It'll be water activities. right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know it makes it more confusing this year, all the moving around, but speaking personally, and I think everyone agrees, we thank you so much for making the budget so much more clearer by making these changes.
I want to thank Larry and Katie, they've been a great help to us.
I purposely look both ways when I
We've
thank
all been meeting often, and Larry, as well, like, thank you all for your support.
I got a question for CJ. The tree work, hazardous tree work, I'm assuming this is for you, jumped up pretty significantly. I'm not denying that you need it, but is there a reason you're anticipating some
Yeah,
additional?
there are still a lot of hazardous trees left, and so that big number comes to about 13 visits.
Got it.
$2,250 per visit for Rainbows. They have it for the full day.
And are we using the same people who do the rest of the village, or is it? Got it, okay, so there's some overriding contract, I assume.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Do you, just so it's sort of on the record, you had asked some questions behind the scenes about sort of, well, you were asking about some specific line items, but there were perhaps larger questions that you
Sure.
want to talk about?
Sure.
Since I've run out of my
Yeah.
list.
Let me pull them up.
I might even have you.
While you're looking, can I ask one
Yeah,
question,
go on.
TJ, about that?
No, I'm for it.
Is this the kind of thing that's gonna be ongoing forever? There's always gonna be new bad trees?
Correct.
It's not something that we're ever gonna, like, you're ever gonna say, hey, we got them all. It's-
And it potentially could get worse with the beach leaf disease. With us using, that's our Tecumseh Parkinson's tree, so.
I'm assuming they drop them and leave them in the woods.
Yeah, so it's a great bang for the buck.
Yeah.
So.
Why is it good to leave them to the island?
It just restores, first off, it's more expensive to have them break it up and cart it out, and secondly, they can, I've got a lot of trees in the property, so I've had to live with this, but it'll just decompose.
Oh, it goes back in.
Yeah,
Exactly, yeah,
right.
It becomes kind of part of the ecosystem.
Okay, I'm gonna ask a big question, like a big overarching question, right? So, in general, I think, and we've had some of these discussions over time about celebrations, what do we decide, like, what do we celebrate, right? So one of the questions that I have is like, when we decide like how to, like what the beautification committee, for example, what greening it does, and like even what it decides to put on Main Street, right? If it decides to put wreaths rather than maybe something less, you know, religious, thank you, you know, like maybe a snowflake, right? And then putting like many Christmassy decorations, mostly that my mother would like, which I find funny, but, and I'm being judgy. And then put a giant, you know, dreidel. So I think in general, like giving some thought to, you know, just putting that out there and giving some thought to what and how we spend our money and what we celebrate. And right, Parks and Recs has a lot to do with what we reflect there. And the Easter egg hunt, which I thought was lovely, but I know a lot of the churches do Easter egg hunts, right? So I think I have some thoughts about maybe we have to rethink and give some thought, like as a community, how we, and what we do, what we celebrate, how we reflect those things as a community, and maybe being mindful of like all the different cultures and celebrations and being more inclusive. Yeah.
For the beautification, the wreaths were done forever.
Yeah.
So I know there's been talk of trying to do like artificial wreaths or snowflakes. We just kind of got lost in the discussion, so it's just been wreaths, but
yeah,
that's something we can talk about. The beautification, our volunteers and most of them have been with us for many years, so I am gonna meet with them anyway to discuss like upcoming decorations and flowers and things
Yeah.
like that, so that's.
I think it's I think that has to come from us. It's a policy thing, and
Okay.
I think we have been talking so much about this, and I think maybe we have to have a clear,
That's
you
fair.
know, we have to have a clear message, which is, you know, we talk so much about like being a diverse and inclusive community, and we have to kind of like walk the walk, talk the talk. I mess up expressions. I probably messed that up already, but like I do think, you know, I'm not Jewish, but I don't want to see a giant dreidel as an afterthought. Like I don't want my community to be that, right? Like I am Catholic. I don't want to see I just don't want to raise my kids in that kind of environment. So I thought the Easter egg hunt was lovely. I thought it was like a little bit, to be quite honest. I was like, my child doesn't need that much chocolate, but she did not feel the same way. She was pretty happy with the chocolate, and it was honestly very lovely. But I do think I want to be mindful, right, of what we celebrate and try to be thoughtful about that. So I think we have to say that as a board, right? We want you guys to be mindful and thoughtful of that. And we have to think about not just like what we've always done and we get it, like volunteers, but that has to come from us, right? We have to say to the volunteers, we get it, but this is what we are telling you now. It can't be, right? Like snowflakes are beautiful, right?
Well, we had
snowflakes.
snowflakes.
We
Yeah.
Do we have
Yeah.
snowflakes? We have a couple of them.
Somewhere in that store too.
Because it was very
Well, no, they go up.
And they probably
I'm
would
kidding,
provide
I'm
more
kidding, I'm
light.
kidding.
They would
It was-
probably
it was
provide
the
more
cost
light, you know?
It
Yeah.
was a cost thing, wreaths or snowflakes, so.
Right, but you could probably get like snowflakes that you are reusable, right? And
Oh,
over
yeah.
time, they would
Yeah,
be,
you just store it.
yeah, they would be more, they would add more light. So I think when I was looking at the budget, and again, we have been talking about this a lot anyway, but I think about celebrations, and I think about like, even like Juneteenth and Pride, and how we are going to include these. We're going to come on our 5th Juneteenth, right? Like, and that should be a big celebration for Irvington. That's a pretty big change in our community. So, I think those are the kinds of things. And like, I think, again, I don't want to pick on the Easter egg hunt. It was absolutely lovely, but it's, I think, one more thing that maybe tilts the.
So
thing.
how that happened was, okay, I know years ago we had,
Yeah.
that went away. It's actually the spring egg hunt now.
Yeah.
The police department PBA approached us and asked, they would like to help co-sponsor. They wanted to bring something back to the community, and that was suggested. So that's why we did it last year, and we're gonna do it again, but we're open to any kind of celebrations you wanna offer. I mean, I'm looking to
You know, everyone
offer,
has some kind of spring celebration, so perhaps
yeah.
that could become inclusive of other.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it just may be like not an egg hunt, because, and it could be something else, because honestly, there are, like, I know that like the Catholic Church here has an egg hunt.
they
I'm
do
sure
their
the
own
other
thing,
ones do. Dobbs Ferry has it, so I just think, I mean, I think if I'm not Christian, that I might not be something I want to go to, right? No matter what you
You'd
call
be
it.
There's
surprised
tons
how
of
many.
Yeah, I know.
Chocolate
It's
is
the candy.
chocolate.
It's
We
the
get it.
candy. I know.
It's
I know, but I think
Yeah, I
I
understand what you're saying.
But I think I know
understand.
plenty of people, by the way, who still feel like, maybe I want to see something that I, don't always want to. Yeah.
But it's nice to know that the police wanted to,
Yeah.
they wanted to
like-
sponsor something, so maybe we can,
Exactly.
I'm not asking you to change this, but
No.
maybe we can help you
Yeah.
find something going forward. Or if you get suggestions and you want to bounce it off us, you're
Sure.
welcome to do that.
And I don't want, that's why I said I don't want to pick on this,
Yeah,
right? I
it was
think
an
it's
example.
it's an example, and I
Right.
think in sort of, just again, if you think about during the holidays, what the village looked like, right? I think if, it's just, it is what it, you can't really escape that.
The only thing, if we, how would we pay for all that? That's the only thing. If we added additional.
Understood.
events,
If
things
we're
like that.
doing this without having given you the budget for it, that's our problem, not yours.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're not saying, hey, we're gonna
So
give
you're
you a
gonna
bunch of
say,
new
I'll give you
celebrations.
3,000 to run, blah, blah,
We'll
blah,
have to
or
figure that
I-
out.
But it's
No.
also about maybe reallocating money from
Correct.
other celebrations.
Right.
We might say, don't
Don't
do this, do this.
Right, and I'm not saying like anything specific, but I know having, been in charge of the Pride celebration the last 2 years, and this year's gonna be the third year. Anyone wants to volunteer or getting the committee together, please reach out to me at bard@irvingtonny.gov. We spent $0 the first year, and we spent $200 last year because we hired a singer. So it's like there's, I don't really want much more than that. I think it's exactly what we're gonna do again, is just have a singer, and then we had volunteers, Josie, our new trustee, our Democratic nominee trustee, Josie Bloom, ran like a little booth where kids could come and make tchotchkes and stuff and everything. It doesn't have to be, everything doesn't have to be expensive. It can just be kind of, respectful and,
Okay, yeah, at the same time, though, we can't then spend a lot of money on other things, right? And say we don't, and then we.
that was my point.
Yeah, no, but I'm
Yeah.
saying, because honestly, like for Juneteenth, we raised all the money, right, at the
Right,
same.
well, that's a different
So,
thing, yeah.
no, I know, but I'm saying that we reallocating, so we do spend $14,000 on greening of so, we are spending money. This is a conversation that clearly
Yeah.
is not about just your
Yeah.
budget. This is a real discussion that we've been having, just,
But it
it's
impacts the
it's about,
budget,
it's a,
so-
this is a policy
Yeah.
discussion, but
Okay.
more to come. But anyways, what else did I have in my email?
Well, while you're looking, you need the beautification committee, can you ask them very respectfully not to block the theater sign when they put it, because every December they block the theater sign up on top of, and I remember the first time I brought a comedy show to the theater that I was producing, and it's like the entire top third
Oh,
of the
the
sign
greening.
was blocked, because you had no idea who the comic was. It was like, this guy is coming to the theater, and there was no name, because the name
Our
was on
signs
top,
were
and-
blocked too, because I remember.
I understand that.
I had to ask the guys, can you move that
Right,
thing?
but I didn't want to
They
speak for
can't.
you, but as a former theater commissioner, as the current liaison, I'm saying, can you tell them not to block the
Sure,
theater
of
sign?
course.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, I mean, the good news is that I had some questions on some numbers that Katie answered.
Okay.
So, right, that's what we do internally too, when we just
Yes.
ask them block numbers and then, okay.
No problem.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
And it's actually for the board. I think without them saying it, the Recreation Department is quite interested to know whether the board plans to run Rocktoberfest this year. And so I think sooner rather than later, and I'm not saying tonight, sooner rather than later, it would be very helpful for them to have direction, because it's a very large commitment of time on their part, and they need to know that, frankly.
And we need to secure things.
Right, so I have a question, I don't know if it's for the rec department or not, but you guys can jump in and think, if you think you guys can help with this. It seems to me, I've never been involved in running Rocktoberfest, but I seem to have met a lot of people who are, and there seems to be a lot of people who don't just want to have it, but really want to be a part of it. And I feel like in the past, it hasn't been easy for people to participate in running it. It was kind of like a closed shop. And I think that, is there a way to have some outreach? Because I think if we just said the word, we need some help, some people to take the lead to run Rocktoberfest, I have a feeling we'd be overrun with people. I could be wrong about that, but I'm just telling you, based on things that people, I have had more than one person come to me and say, hey, I really like to be involved with helping to run Rocktoberfest, and then I would like send an email, and then I'd say, well, what happened? It's like, they got back to me, but they really didn't, there was no follow-up, they didn't really give the people anything to do.
Or maybe
So-
the initial question is, how is Rocktoberfest run? Right? How does, from your perspective, how is Rocktoberfest run?
It's a part of the rec department, but it's also connected through FACE,
Right.
which I guess is a whole different conversation.
So I guess, is there a way, I guess my question is there a way for the rec department and for FACE, and the village could help, right? And put a word out and say, we are looking for volunteers who are willing to help run Rocktoberfest, not work at Rocktoberfest, not like being at a booth, but to help run it. And if nobody steps forward, then nobody steps forward, but I will be shocked if you're not like getting lots of people stepping forward.
I would think you have to talk to FACE first.
Yeah, I think that needs to be a
Yeah,
fixed.
and I have had people reach out to me from FACE, but let me ask a slightly different question. you're just now in charge as of tonight. And all of you are sort of picking up additional responsibilities. I'm not asking you to make a decision about Rocktoberfest, but in general, are you looking to add things to your plate? We are gonna have to have a conversation, and Larry included up there, about the future of this and the economics of it, and I understand it's generally done as a fundraiser, but that's our problem. So my question to you is, and again, you can make this about something other than Rocktoberfest if you want to, but do you feel confident, or would you like a few months to get your new roles under your belt and make sure that everything's under control, or do you want to start adding things to your plate, which this effectively is? And it's okay to answer either way. You're not getting penalized for that.
Yeah, no, it depends what you would like to, we could talk. I'm definitely interested in adding things, yeah.
Okay.
Just that if you're talking about
Just as an
Rocktoberfest,
observation,
Well,
that's,
you know, as an observation,
that's a
from the rec end, without there having been a significant component of FACE helping with Rocktoberfest, if they were not doing Rocktoberfest, they would have a lot more time to do other things.
Yes.
I think it takes up a tremendous amount of.
Maybe that's a better way to ask the question.
Right. I think they know how to do it.
Yeah.
I think they need
I don't doubt
the
that.
guidelines to do it, but I think FACE needs to step up as a group to become much more organized and sort of hold up their end to allow these guys to then, take on other work.
So can I ask a question based on that? So I understand that in the past it's been a FACE event and you know way more about it, and you're saying FACE has to step up. I'm stepping out of that. I have no idea, I'm taking your word for it on it. What I'm asking is there a way to do Rocktoberfest without it being overwhelming to the?
That's what I would love to see.
And it doesn't have to, it can be
That's the
through
point that I
FACE.
think I'm getting to.
Right, but I'm saying it doesn't have to be FACE. Could it be?
Well,
No,
no matter what you do, there's going to be a very significant component of the village personnel
Right.
involved in this, because it's not only rec, it's probably the police, it's DPW, it's everybody.
so it basically, it sounds like what should have or maybe started anticipated, like something run by a committee, has fallen significantly on them. That's what I hear.
And some of the reason this is coming up now is you've got long lead time items like the stage. One thing for this board to consider is whether the new stage, which we will presumably vote on when the capital budget comes up in the next month, or like 2 months. 2 months, okay. Which understandably won't be open until 2025, whether that might not be an interesting way to return Rocktoberfest to its glory and have other programs there as well. Not making a decision at this point, it's just something that we need to think about and probably have an answer, and talk to FACE to see if they're capable, not, prepared to run this process.
The way I would describe the way things have evolved over the years, and maybe other people have different recollections of it, but the rec department acts as the last resort. So if there's a very high level of volunteer participation, then there can be somewhat less participation need by the rec department. But when that falls off, they have to pick up the slack, because at the end of the day, the event still has to run.
Right.
So that's the reality in more recent years. And again, it's not a criticism. There's a lot of people do a lot of good work on
And
it,
it's also an all-day
Rocktoberfest.
event, so it's not a short,
Right.
or
But
5 hours, whatever.
But regardless of whether you have 10 volunteers or 20 volunteers, they have to step up and make sure that it gets done. So, and that's how it's evolved over the years.
But doesn't that go back to my first point, and my first question, I guess, was can we find, I think we can find people who would be excited about taking on a lot of that stuff, so that you guys could just be the support underneath and not having to be doing all of that stuff. And you're nodding because you agree?
No, we'll take help. We're always open to volunteers.
Another aspect are sponsorships. That's a big thing for that day, right?
Right, presumably it's not a moneymaker.
Yeah, this event doesn't make money unless you have sponsorship. So
Because if we get a bad rainy day
And
or
that
something.
shouldn't fall on the rec department. to-
No,
to-
absolutely
No,
not.
I'm just throwing that
But
in.
again, that falls on us because we're making a decision whether or not to do something that has the risk of being a money maker.
If you have the right group of people running it, then you'll have sponsors, that's my point. I think it's worthwhile just to see, look, I'm not, I don't have a crystal ball. Like, we could say, hey, could we get volunteers, who's interested in doing this? And literally no one emails, and if that's the case, then we kind of have an answer.
I mean, I don't think that falls on us. I think that falls on FACE.
Well,
I think
it
you
falls on
say to
FACE.
FACE, this is your event, Rocktoberfest. Do you want to do it? Put a call out to people. They're gonna support you, but they can't be the primary, which has been happening. I'm just repeating what I'm
I
hearing.
guess what I'm saying, but if FACE doesn't want to do it, there might be other people that want to do it.
Understood, but you have to, well, okay, yes, but you have to let them say, you have to let that happen, right? Like, yeah.
So let me suggest this, since we have another meeting in short order, we can talk about it in the meanwhile, doesn't
Very
have to be
short.
decided tonight, it's before next Monday, and just decide what direction we want to go, and reach out to FACE if that's the direction we decide we want to go, just to see if they're prepared to do this. Because there is a lot to be done, and quite honestly, with all the other things we got going on, none of us is really in a position to manage that process. It's either a handoff or it's not. And I don't want you folks to be frontline either.
Yeah, because the hard part is, we have a hold on the stage right now.
Yeah.
The bands, the music trucks, party line, all those people are reaching out because you want us to hold our spot.
But we can also think about it in other ways. There's other ways, to use different types of bands.
Say
There's other
something.
ways, what I'm saying, there's just a lot of, we don't have to do it exactly as we always do.
Sure.
Right?
There's ways to evolve
You
and
can,
change.
you could reach out to Doug and the Halloween band stuff and see, maybe there's some way to do that where you don't have to pay the bands that much money. You see what I'm saying? Like, I'm just saying that.
Yeah, but it's still
But
work, it's still work for them, it
Hey,
doesn't matter how
hey,
you cut
you
it.
have them planning it.
Yeah,
You
that, you don't
have
want.
them planning
Yeah.
it.
Well, no, so whoever is volunteering could reach out,
big
not
part.
literally you guys. What I was saying was, because you're saying you have to make all these reservations early, and I'm saying the people who
I
are
know.
gonna be running it could be reaching out to other types of situations for all of the things you just mentioned.
So this line right here, just go like this.
So I see people ready to jump out of their seats from RPAC, and is anybody on FACE out there? But yes, come on.
Evening, Michael Smith, Harriman Road. I'm a member of RPAC, but I was also heavily involved in the running of, or assisting in the running, particularly Mike, of Rocktoberfest. I think one issue that you haven't addressed and that will come before you is the one that we were faced with this year. And that is, what is the purpose of Rocktoberfest? This year's Rocktoberfest, as we understood it, was as a fundraiser for FACE. Therefore, the things that we did were to maximize the fundraising for FACE. And therefore, other groups that came to us, perhaps late in the process, who wanted to use Rocktoberfest for their own fundraising efforts, would have to justify to us how it would affect our running of Rocktoberfest. So, for example, I'll use the Bulldogs, the Irvington Bulldogs, came to us at the very end because they had been invited in the course of meetings. They didn't integrate themselves with us, and at the last minute, they wanted to do something. It didn't seem to work out for us. That doesn't mean that the board, as a matter of policy, could decide these are the things that we want to see at Rocktoberfest because this is a village celebration. Then you would have to decide how and who would decide which groups, whether they be Irvington groups or outside groups, get to participate in Rocktoberfest. For example, the River Arts community, I remember last year, wanted to hold an event, first on their own last June, and then perhaps as part of us. That's an outside group. You're certainly free to invite them to be part of Rocktoberfest. But I think you would then, no matter who is running Rocktoberfest, you would have to establish some guidelines perhaps as to who's going to decide and how we should decide who should be part of it.
what are your thoughts on that? Because it's, you're being very objective into saying that, but it sounds like it sounds like you have an opinion on it that you're not sharing. Do you have an opinion on that you're not sharing with us, or no?
I think it needs to be limited. I don't see any reason why you can't have other, if using again the Bulldogs, if they had been part of it from early on, I don't see why they wouldn't have been part of it early on. It's because they themselves, and with no disrespect, they weren't that organized. So while we were, so when they came to us at the last minute, it may have rubbed them off the wrong way. They didn't like having their own tent where they had their tent. They wanted to have it on the stage, various reasons why we decided that wouldn't work. I think if you had a few organizations that wanted to whether they wanted to fundraise or display their wares, that could certainly be incorporated, but we would want them to be involved early, not late.
So your message is early, that's
correct. That's correct. But you can't have everybody. Obviously,
Right. No.
not everybody who wants to be part of it can be. You have to have some selection process. Maybe there'll only be a handful.
So I can talk about the Bulldog stuff because I was involved in it, and I actually spoke extensively to Joe for over many months. I think there was probably a bit of a disconnect. I just think there was not good coordination. I wouldn't say, and again, I think it's a learning. There was like some learning that needed to happen, and there was not good coordination, because I think sort of what was agreed to probably by the board, because it was always, I think when Christina did the presentation to the board, it was like, Rocktoberfest, yes, and by the way, Brian was always like, yes, like involved, and the understanding was that Brian was always involved with FACE. So that was, I think, always a miscommunication, because I think the idea was that Brian was communicating that, which I don't know, maybe that didn't happen, right? So I just think that didn't happen, and that was a miscommunication. That's a lesson learned, right? But I think the idea was the Bulldogs along Main Street. The idea was it's a fundraiser for Irvington, bringing people to Irvington, fundraising for the village, which was a good project to marry with what FACE does with Rocktoberfest. So to me, it was just like a failure of communication, which lesson learned, maybe not a good project to work together, but that's to me separate. But in the end, I think what we're talking about here is really important to decide kind of going forward. What's different now is, from this board, Brian's not on this board. Brian was on FACE. He sort of took the reins. Nobody on this board is on FACE. We need to know, they're not going to be the, runners of Rocktoberfest. So we really need to know what FACE is going to do. Are they going to take the reins? They can support, but I think we really need to communicate and understand from FACE who's going to run this event, how's it going to go forward, and then we can talk about these other issues, like what might that look like, what you guys don't want there. We may say, like, we want it to look a little different. We can have those discussions, but I do think there needs to be a discussion going forward. What's going to happen? Who's going to run that event going forward? Because I think what we're saying is it can't be Parks and Recs. Like that can't be the primary driver on the years, like you say, when there's less volunteer involvement. I think that's the real issue that we're talking about.
So let me just suggest that maybe the best next step is I'll try to collect everybody's emails so I have on record as being on FACE, and send one out, and maybe we'll do a Zoom or something of that sort, just to hear that everybody says, hey, I want to do it. And I have talked to people as recently as last night who are on the committee saying they're interested in doing it. But it's still worth having the conversation, because there's a lot of work involved for you folks and for them. I wanted to clarify one point you made. You said you're raising money for FACE. I assume that means for the benefit of the rec department? Or
For whom? Yeah.
when in other words, you used the phrase, when we're raising money, it's for FACE. Does that mean FACE is disposing of the dollars that you're raising? Because
No, they make recommendations on where.
Yeah, that
what
I have
programs
no,
or
I got no
efforts you
problem
can
with
go to.
that. I just, sorry.
Village, all village functions. I mean, they're not
Got
separate.
it.
They're
I
not
was only
separate.
picking on your language, not your sentiment or your
No,
philosophy.
it was that it was, that there was a purpose and there were others who were competing with that purpose. That's
Got
all.
it. Got it. Okay, no problem.
But early understanding is your takeaway from this, right? If this is all set early on, then everything can go forward.
Correct.
Right. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Okay,
All
so
right.
we got a meeting next Monday. By then we'll make up our minds and collectively, although it sounds like we're pretty close to that. And then I'll send out an email to everybody just to get the band back together.
Thank you very much.
Did you say get the band?
Yes, I did.
Uh,
Okay, I think you're done, unless anybody else has something to add. Yeah, yes.
Do you guys have anything to add?
Now, by the way, we sort of have, the board has an agreement, and I think Larry and Katie are aware. Whatever comments we have, we may, or responses we have, they may come up at the very end of this whole process, because we're clearly waiting to see how the whole budget shapes up before we're saying to people, hey, you can't do this, you can't do that, or do something different. So you're not, I guess that's my polite way of saying you're not off the hook yet, but you are tonight.
This is information gathering, it's not decision.
Right.
Thank you.
And congratulations to all of you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
It's good to see everyone sitting at the table.
I know.
It's a real team
And
spirit.
for those of you who are on our pack, our next thing is we're gonna make you legal and bring your numbers up to what you actually have.
More finite.
Yes, okay, more finite if you would like that.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Better find out when to say exclusive.
Please make it stop.
It's like, that's not-
All of it.
I'm
tired.
Oh, I know, I cut 3 hours of sleep.
We're doing better than I thought, so. Sorry, Larry.
You know what, Larry?
I had low
Larry.
expectations.
This one.
And when I go to my
You talk a lot.
Yeah,
You talk a
sorry.
I
lot.
have to prep 2 deadlines.
And by the way, I talk a lot, so that's saying a lot.
Good night.
Good night.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, good job, Maureen.
Thank
First
you.
time.
Thank you all.
You did great.
Okay, next up, modification membership for the Recreation and Parks Advisory Committee.
We're just gonna make sure we do it.
Yes. Resolve to limit the membership for the Recreation and Parks Advisory Committee to 9 members. That's my motion. Anyone want to second that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Okay.
Now that everyone left, it's weird that you're in the back.
Going back 4 or 5 years, I was the only one who was ever.
Back yes, I remember that. Okay, approval of Village of Irvington's Volunteer Fire Department Service Award listing.
That wasn't in the materials.
It is.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Well, you probably don't have the, oh yeah, we do
Yeah,
have
no,
the
we have
list.
the listing.
It
It is
is
in there.
page 54 of 58. How's that?
So the volunteer fire department, based on, I guess, showing up for service and doing
Thanks,
trainings. I know they have fire points, rescue points, training, drills, meetings. They get points throughout the year. If they reach 50 points for the year, they're eligible for 1 year of service credit towards a pension they get. So if they have over 50 points, they'll get 1 year of service, and then when they retire, they would receive $25 per year of service per month, up to a maximum of 40 years. And I know they have a system, I think, of fingerprint punching, where they gather the points and they post it on their bulletin board to kind of so if anyone has any objections, they would speak up about the points.
Remember Brian did a good explanation of this last year, do you remember? No.
I don't remember what he said particularly, but
No, just
I thought that was a pretty good
Pretty
explanation.
what Katie said, that's what I'm saying, yeah. Katie did a great job. I'm just saying that, like, I kind of remember, as she was saying it, Brian did a great job. I remembered it. I was like, oh, I understand this.
So if there's no comments on the list, I will make the motion to resolve to approve the 2023 service listing for volunteers of the Village of Irvington Fire Department to be used for the length of service award plan. I will not recite the list, it's on the
Thank
public
you.
record. And do I have a
But I
second?
do want to know
Oh,
what
please.
Brian Smith's 4 points are.
It's usually, he said last year, that it's usually going to
A dinner.
a funeral.
Yes.
No, a funeral.
Funeral? I thought you
Funeral.
said dinner.
It's a funeral, yeah.
I'm sorry to have interrupted.
That's
I'll,
okay.
I'll
You can
second, I'll
Yeah,
second the
you made
motion.
up for it. All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, Larry, I think it was a funeral. I think that's.
My favorite fire story with Brian is when at a meeting he gets called, doesn't say, he's a trustee, and the mayor doesn't say a word. And then later leans over and goes, you know, that call was to your house.
Oh my God.
Thankfully, it was nothing, but it was like, he said, I debated whether to tell you or not. Anyway, volunteer appointments. So these have all been cycled past you at one time or another, so I'll just read it as a resolution here. Resolve to appoint the following village board volunteer committee members. The ARB first alternate, Han Amin, term to expire December 2028. Library board member Roddy Austin, term to expire December 2025. ZBA first alternate Charlie Flock, December 2024, and Charlie's being moved up from second alternate. ZBA second alternate Clem Turner, December 2026. And by the way, of all of these I'm reading, the chair people or the boards themselves have spoken to these people already. Further resolve to appoint the following ad hoc committee members with a term to expire December 2024. Housing Committee member Kay O'Keefe, Traffic Calming member Haley Schultz. That's, anybody want to second that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Okay. Award of contract 2024-02 for school bus services for the Irvington Recreation and Park Summer Camps. Whereas one bid was received for contract 2024-02 for school bus services for the Irvington Recreation and Parks Summer Camp as follows. It was Academy Bus Company for a price of $33,575. Whereas the village administrator has determined the bid from Academy Bus Company is in order and responsive to the specifications. Now therefore be it resolved to award contract 2024-02 for school bus services for the Irvington Recreation and Park Summer Camps to Academy Bus Company, Inc. at the total price submitted in their bid, and to authorize the village administrator to execute said contract.
That's what Teamscape, I assume, right?
The school buses are used mostly by day camp, but I think there is some overlap into, I think Teamscape uses them from time to time as well.
They can use them for going trips, not for, to get the kids to camp.
Yeah, oh yeah, for trips.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, yeah.
Do I have a second on that one?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Rejection of bid for coach bus services for Irvington Recreation and Park Summer Camps. You want to give the
I'll just give a
short
quick
version?
explanation. Yeah, so we did receive one bid, which is not the concerning factor. The concerning factor is that it turns out that a pretty large provider of coach buses in the area was prevented from bidding because we included in the specifications a requirement for a DVD player in the coach bus. Now, that seems like a minor item, but it turns out this very large provider, very recently, within the last year, took all of their DVD players out for whatever reason. They no longer stock them with the audiovisual equipment. So it prevented them from bidding for over a silly thing, you know, something we didn't know had changed on the landscape. So we'd rather have competition here if we can, and that one minor item certainly shouldn't be a reason that we would eliminate competition. So we took it out of the specifications, we're gonna rebid it, and, you know, we should have a competitive.
And we were right
price.
to turn down the one bid that came.
Yes. Mhm. Yeah, and this is the formal rejection that has to happen. So then everyone's gonna, you know, everyone had a chance to bid it the first time around, but, you know, again, we have the right to change our specifications.
The motion is, whereas the Village of Irvington solicited bids for coach bus services for the Irvington Recreation and Park Summer Camps, and whereas the Village of Irvington has reviewed all bids received, now therefore be it resolved to reject all bids received for the coach bus services for the Irvington Farmington Recreation and Parks Summer Camp 2024-01. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we've reached the end of our regularly scheduled programming. Reports of board, standing committees and officers. Larry Ogrodnik, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I just have a really quick update from the building department, from Ed. He said they've been pretty busy with 3040 South Broadway. It looks like they're going to start sometime in March. They're also working through planning board submissions and the state annual report. That's all I have.
No report.
I usually don't have much, but today I have so many things I have to mention. So the Route 9 committee meeting today, I just want everyone to know, to get a word out to everyone that you can, that March 7th at 6 p.m. at the Tarrytown Senior Center is going to be the New York State is the first chance they're giving for people to come and hear about their ideas for reimagining Broadway from Sleepy Hollow to Hastings. And it's the first time people have an opportunity to come and say what they want for their communities. Each community is definitely going to have a say to some extent over what happens in their community. So Irvington needs to start thinking about that. But there's going to be a lot of information conveyed and a lot of opportunity for feedback at that meeting. So anyone who can go should go. I plan on being there March 7th, 6 o'clock at the Tarrytown Senior Center. The theater is having an event. We really want to support them because they're doing an amazing job of staying out there without an actual theater. We have a theater without a theater. So they're doing their annual Short Play Fest. It's March 10th at Mercy College. It's free. It's not about making money. It's about keeping the profile out there. I've heard that the short plays are just amazing this year. They got a lot of great submissions. And what's really cool is there's 4 being featured plus 1 from Mercy, because that's kind of the arrangement to go there. But from the 10th to the 16th for free, you can stream online another 4 that are not going to be live at Mercy. As far as the school board goes, I just want to mention that Dr. Harrison retired for health reasons as superintendent. I'm sure most people know that, and the board has hired a search firm to have another person. And the last thing, I guess that was it. I think there was another.
Well, if you come up with it, we'll come back to you.
Okay.
Okay.
So I got a report from DPW. So I'm just gonna go through the winter storms. So from the 6th to the 7th, 4.5, this is what they had to deal with. 4.5 inches of snow from the 6th to the 7th, 2.5 inches of snow with ice on the 16th to the 17th, 1 inch of snow on the 19th, 7 inches of snow on the 13th, and 3 inches of snow on the 17th. And I'm sure we all appreciate the great job that they did. That's it from me.
Second that.
Yeah.
Always.
Did you find anything more?
No, I was
Okay.
something that's.
All right, village administrators report.
Just a quick note that we are working hard to assemble a pretty large grant application for the Hudson Valley Regional Council. They're planning on submitting a grant application to the federal government for it's basically for emissions reduction, specifically focused on conversion of buildings from oil, fossil fuel to electric. And we are looking at this building.
That's great.
Yeah, to complete it. So obviously the theater is being taken care of now, but the rest of the building is a mix and match of lots of different things. And so we're looking to eliminate the oil heat from this building.
Great.
So, but we have our engineers furiously working on that, as Larry Lonke saw this morning, trying to get the plans together in short order, like by March 8th. So, thank you. Yeah.
Clerk treasurer's report.
No report.
Okay.
I don't have a report, but I'd like to meet with the board after the meeting just for a quick minute.
No problem. Public comment, you got anything you want to add?
He's heard enough.
All right, yes, I'm sure he has. Okay, so I guess
you wore everyone out.
we're going to executive session
No.
to discuss a legal matter and for
No.
Advice of counsel.
advice of counsel.
Your
Sorry.
executive sessions for personnel, that's it.
Got it.
Yep.
All right, and personnel. Sorry.
We learned that at the.
Yes, we did, yeah. In
Okay,
all
so
too much
personnel.
detail.
So motion,
Motion to go
motion.
to
Executive, no.
Executive session for
Executive session
personnel
for personnel.
Oh, you have one. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in
Thank
favor?
you.
Aye.
Okay.
I did want to tell you that one of the
Larry,
plays,
someone will call you, I
one of
think.
the plays to be
Okay, thanks.